I think sometimes when we see Irish America, we tend to think of green beer and loud plaid trousers and kind of people who speak in very funny accents about Ireland and think of themselves as Irish, and we kind of tend to think of them as plastic paddies or somehow not being as Irish as we are, and sometimes being almost a little bit of a kind of a joke. But whenever I hear that, what I always want to kind of say as well is that we know equally little about the Irish Americans or the American Irish as they know about us sometimes. Okay, so that the ignorance or the lack of knowledge cut both ways. And if you want to kind of condescend to Irish America, and I hear it all the time because I work for an Irish American institution, the University of Notre Dame, you will hear it in spades. So the first thing I would want to say is that I think in this country we have a very immature and badly formed understanding actually of what American and Irish people are all about. And I've worked with the University of Notre Dame since 1998, and I would say I'm still only getting to understand what that culture is as I learn more about the varieties of America. Because when you think about America as well, you tend to think about New York or San Francisco or Chicago or the places you see on the TV, but more of America is like Indiana or Iowa. I have 42 students who just arrived from the University of Notre Dame. For many of them, it's really almost scary and very unusual for them to be in what they think of as a very big cosmopolitan city like Dublin. So, you know, more of America is like Indiana or Iowa than it is like New York or San Francisco. And most of what we hear or even think about when we talk about America comes from those big cities, but it's not representative of the totality of the experience. I would also say something else about this, and again, this is something we don't really sufficiently understand in this country, and that is that Ireland is a tiny, tiny, tiny little speck, an island behind an island off the offshore rim of Europe, right? If you picked Ireland up and dropped it in the Great Lakes, you'd spend a long time looking for it. And yet, you know, there are more people named Patrick in America than there are citizens in Ireland. There's more people in the hinterland of Chicago than there is in the whole of our island. And yet, despite that, despite the fact that we're so tiny and so small, we have this huge presence, huge visibility, and we also have what marketing people in the jargon would call a kind of a brand in America. We're seen, for example, as being green. Okay? Now, if you have the brand of a country as being green now in terms of food production or whatever, you'd have to spend bloody billions on it. That's handed to us on a plate. And there's also always an incredible welcome and an incredible willingness to entertain the Irish in America. Entertain in the sense of listening to us and trying to do something for us or whatever, right? So, you know, there are other countries that would give their eye teeth to have the visibility, the access, the door openers, the political clout, the economic clout that the American Irish bring to us. So that's something that we should never undervalue. Now, when we think about that, the next thing people will always say is, oh, well, let's kind of monetize it. Let's use that as a kind of a way, you know, almost as a kind of an economic milk cow. And again, I think that's totally the wrong way to go about it. What this is about, if this is to work, it's about building a relationship. And like any relationship, that takes time to get to know the person, it takes time to build trust, it takes time, effort, energy, years. You can't just click your finger and turn on American Irish or Irish America and connect them back here to my own dear county of Wexford or whatever. It takes a long time. But if you do it, and if you work at it, there are tangible benefits. For example, I work for the Keogh Nocton Notre Dame Centre in Dublin. It's called after two people, Don Keogh and Martin Nocton. Don Keogh has Wexford ancestry, and Don Keogh insisted that the Coca-Cola factory, which has just been opened outside Wexford last year, I think, you know, he insisted that that factory be placed in Wexford, and now I think there's going to be 300 good, sustainable jobs which come out of that. But Don Keogh has been involved with Ireland over a long period. He's come back here. He's had a long connection with the University of Notre Dame, and, you know, from that has come this kind of thing, which eventually ends up in something that's of economic benefit to it. But it's not as if Don Keogh dropped in off a private jet into Wexford, put a factory down, and went. Don Keogh has been involved with Ireland over 3 decades. I work with the University of Notre Dame, as I said. This weekend we had a game in Dublin, and you know, we brought 35,000 people to that game. Now, we also played Navy in a game in Croke Park back in 1996. At that stage, we had 10,000 fans. What is the difference between 1996 and 2012 in terms of Notre Dame. The difference is that since then we started an Irish Studies program on campus. We started a Dublin Centre, which I have the privilege to run in Dublin. We built the relationship, we nurtured it, we teach the Irish language. We have 450 students who take Irish back at Notre Dame, and we reached out to them. And what we have done is to encourage the re-engagement of Notre Dame, the Fighting Irish, with what they think of and what they really feel as their kind of emotional and spiritual kind of homeland. So what I want to kind of say about that is that in a sense what we have done is build a relationship. The difference is that we have worked at that. We've brought people back and forward. We now have 20 full-time faculty out of the University of Notre Dame. We have a lot of power behind us in terms of support and benefactor community and whatever. And in the long term then, we also have a great Irish champion in Martin Upton, who owns Glendimplex, the electrical appliance company. Okay, but as a result of that, and as a result of a very good partnership with the Irish government and business and whatever, we just had a fantastic weekend, 35,000 fans, worth 100 million straight up to the country. It's worth 300 million in the longer term. Now that's monetary value, but in the longer term what's even more important is the set of relationships, the set of opportunities, the long-term connection that comes from that. I've put 2,000 students through my hands in my work in Dublin since 1998, and I can say the vast majority of those go back to America as cheerleaders and door openers and supporters of Ireland. They're the people who will go to an Irish film or an Irish music concert or buy an Irish book or whatever. And in this is the thing I want to kind of leave you with, is, you know, traditionally we have relied on the blood link. Traditionally, we've relied on the fact that the American Irish or the Irish Americans are, you know, the descendants of ours, or that we have been sending people out there. But in the current generation or the next generation, blood is going to be replaced by ink, by laptops, by the digital space. People are going to have to opt, as it were, to connect with us, because as Irish immigration into America has slowed, that blood link will inevitably thin and become more anorexic. We've got to fill that space with our culture, with our voice, with the projection of all that is great about Ireland. Our literature, our music, our sports. I'm now working very actively, Liam Griffin will be glad to know, to try and get the Gaelic football and hurling out onto the campus of Notre Dame. Those are the things where we punch above our weight. Those are the things that people look to us. They think of us as being very good talkers, very good writers, very good musicians, great crackers, we would say. People look to us for that, but they also admire us for it, and that is something which projects us out into the world. We're lucky that we share an Anglophone space with America. Our culture is very visible, very audible within America, but what we have to think about this is as a relationship, about understanding where Irish America is coming from, and not just looking at this and kind of seeing the kind of dollar signs.
Somebody asked me to ask you about your Wexford connection, because you've spoken about your links with America. So a little bit about that Wexford connection, the fact that you're from a family of 12.
Yeah, well, I come from a townland called Johnstown, and it's in the parish of Donegal. Donegal is an unusual parish because it straddles 3 counties, Wicklow, Wexford and Carlow. I happen to be lucky enough to be born on the Wexford side of it, though I could throw a stone into Carlow, but I played all my football with Kildare in Carlow as a school in Donegal, and then to the FCJ in Bunclody. But like many people born on a border, I would feel very strongly Wexford. When I was in the schoolyard in Donegal, the playground rows were always between the Wexford Yellow Bellies, the Wicklow Goatsuckers and the Carlow Scallinators. And that's where it is going to come from, a big family, because I'm the youngest of the boys in the Whelan's, and it always meant I had big brothers to kind of look out for me. But that would be my connection there. And I could also say I always knew about Notre Dame, because my granduncle, Brother Aidan O'Reilly, was actually left Bunclody, where his father, my grandfather, Park Riley, was a cooper. And he left Bunclody as a relatively young teenager, age 16, to go out to Indiana, to the Golden Dome of Notre Dame, where he joined the congregation there as a Christian brother and lived his whole life there, and actually died there in 1948. So when I go to Notre Dame, I can actually visit the ancestor of my Bunclody relative, Brother Aidan O'Reilly.
Thank you very much, Kevin. The arrival from 96 to where we are now, from that 10,000 to 35,000, whatever you mentioned, massive improvement in figures there. If you have any questions you want to put to Kevin, you'll get a chance at the end of all 4 addresses. So we'll move to speaker number 2. Looking at this guy's CV, a waiter, a bouncer, a charity fundraiser, a hair salon.